Competitive Edge Research, San Diego's premier public opinion research firm, sponsors this podcast because they like good journalism as much as they like good polling. Since 1987, Competitive Edge has helped clients see the why buried deep within the numbers. Competitive Edge designs comprehensive research studies, collects bulletproof data, and employs robust analytics so you'll understand why things are the way they are. Competitive Edge. Know what to do.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice of San Diego podcast. I'm Scott Lewis, Editor-in-Chief of Voice of San Diego. I'm joined, of course, as always, by my colleagues, Andrew Keatts.
What's up, buddy?
My other colleague, Sara Libby, Managing Editor.
Hey, what's up?
And Andy's Assistant Editor.
Those are the titles that we have.
I went to a concert this week. And,
Proud of you, bud.
Thank you. So I stood the whole time,
Whew.
and I was having trouble toward the end. Having a little trouble. It was Tom York. I was enjoying it, but my back was aching, my legs were aching. I felt really old. And you called me old last week, and things are just...
I was on the SDSU campus yesterday, and there were like youngs walking by all around, and I was in a full like business outfit, hobbling with like an ace bandage on my ankle, and I felt 100 years old.
Yeah.
Velvet is back, by the way.
Velvet.
As indicated by the youngs I passed
Really?
at SDSU. Yeah, it's back.
Like all pieces?
A lot of like velvet jumpsuits and whatnot.
I like velvet. It's nice. All right, so I bring that concert up.
Do you?
I don't know. It's soft. Why would you not like velvet?
I don't know.
Who doesn't like velvet?
It's very Costanza of you.
Yeah,
That's right.
I was at the Tom York concert, and as we were walking out, a listener of the pod said hi, a guy named Lev. I just want to shout out to Lev and his companion. Thank you so much for saying hi. If you're ever out there and you do see us, it's very good for us if you say hi and recommend the show, but it just makes us feel good about doing it. And I just love all of you out there. I just want to shout out as we end the year. The podcast has been a real highlight for me every week, and all the people that seem to be coming out to our live shows and just showing up and saying hi. Thank you, Lev, and everybody else. It's very nice, and I'm sure you guys feel the same.
Yeah. Also, give us some ratings on iTunes. Go in, put 5 stars down, and write some nice things. It would be great.
Or
be
a
a great
tweet.
Christmas present.
Yeah,
for us.
exactly. Right. That those help people find it. We get a lot of people who move to San Diego and are looking to sort of try to understand San Diego, and so they look for a local podcast. So
Then they listen to one episode. They're like, "That was bad." They never listen again.
Yeah, a couple of them stick around.
Yeah.
But anything you can do to share it and recommend it would be very helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, we can't produce this podcast. Now, I'm serious. Please listen to this or any of the stories, the newsletters, the events you enjoy. We can't do any of that without support from listeners like you. If you've already donated, thank you for your support. If you have not made a donation yet, now is the time to do it. Our year-end fundraising campaign is still underway, and we need to raise $175,000 from people like you by December 31st. If we don't, the portals to hell will open up. Everything will go bad. The bolts of the universe will come off. It's just not good. Let's not go there. If you like the podcast or value our work, let us know by making a donation at voiceofsandiego.org/donate. Your gift will ensure that Voice of San Diego starts 2019 in a strong financial position, ready to tackle the news that you want and that you need and that you yearn for. Thank you. All right. Let's do a couple of bits of news. So, we had our Voice of the Year this week.
We did.
I think of it as your project, Sarah. It's kind of your thing.
It is, and every time I put it together, I think never again will I put myself through this. Yeah. It was excruciating and awful, and I hate it. And then it comes out, and I'm like, hey, that's
That was
nice.
fun, yeah. I think that's journalism general.
Yeah,
It
could be.
It's terrible, and then it comes out, and you're like, that turned out to be something I like doing.
Yes.
It'd be cool if I ever experienced that sensation.
You don't? Yeah.
Only misery for me.
It's
forever.
Yeah, same here. All right. So the voice of the year. So our voice this year was Monica Montgomery. Tell us a second why we chose her.
I'm going to have Andy do it. He was the one who made, so we narrowed it down as a staff to 3 top contenders, and Andy actually spoke on behalf of Monica, made the case for Monica. And so tell us how you roused us.
Yeah. Well, so I think obviously her campaign was unprecedented in a certain way. She knocked off a city council incumbent without basically any institutional support. Labor Union, the party, were opposed to her, as were Lincoln Club and the mayor. And she did it by 15 points. But that's actually less interesting to me than how she did it. And it was her ability to kind of coalesce a community voice and a singular community voice that produced itself into the political world. I think there's a metaphor in there for what different communities in the city or movements within the city could do to a city government that has been largely unresponsive for the last few decades.
I think that's a really interesting way to put it, that she almost personified this conversation, this discussion going forward in such a clear and unified way that her voice literally spoke for a community and was so successful. It's not just that she won a campaign. Plenty of people won a campaign.
Right.
It's that it really had that sync, right?
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating about it. The fact that everything was stacked against her and it didn't matter even a little is just, it's interesting and it is rare.
Yes.
So that was our main voice of the year. Now, we had how many others? 10?
12 others.
12 others.
So there were 13 total, I think.
Right. And so, look, some years we've had, like our first year, we had Bob Filner as our voice of the year. That was the year he had a really bad year at the end. But just the idea of, it's not an honor necessarily. It's a recognition of somebody who really, truly started a conversation and made an impact over that year. And so that's sometimes negative, and that's sometimes a more positive framing. Tell us about some of the others that really, stuck out for you.
So I sort of went into the list thinking Judge Dana Sabra, a federal judge who was really heavily involved in the family separation case, and sort of stepped in and said, that practice was indeed happening. The administration said it wasn't, and that it was immoral, and stopped it, and has overseen the process of reunifying these families. I thought he might end up being the voice of the year. He made the list, certainly. So that was an interesting one. And then there's like some more lighthearted ones. I think we were all dying reading Rye Rivard's write-up of Bros on Scooters. So if you haven't read it, please go to the website and read it. It's a thing of beauty, really.
He really flexed. He's quietly one of the best writers, I think, in the region, but he just flexed all his writing muscles. I'm going to read one paragraph here. It was just so good. He says, having abandoned neckties, liberalized sexual relations, and legalized marijuana, Californians always in need of something new to tisk-tisk. This year had dockless motorized scooters and the bros who rode them. The scooters came out of nowhere, dropped on city sidewalks by companies with cute names, Bird, Lime, etc. The bros came from where they usually come from, Brunch, Michigan, OB.
So good. Mwah, chef's kiss.
Loved it. So yes, check out the whole list. There's a bunch on there. We had to do an instant runoff voting to pull it off. And
shout out to Ryan Klumner.
Yeah, right.
And we didn't have to. We chose to preemptively.
We did, yeah.
There wasn't a tie first. We said the best way to come to this conclusion will be with ranked choice voting.
We've got 3 good contenders, and so all right. Well, another bit of news: San Diego Unified last week agreed to a new policy in which the district will retain email or employee emails for 2 years before deleting them. This, of course, came after our lawsuit. The Voice of San Diego sued, and San Diegans for Open Government sued separately. Our lawsuit is a much larger suit about the responsiveness of the district to our public records requests. But the district agreed to settle that. It still needs to get approved by a judge. But the settlement is a pretty big improvement. They had proposed, of course, to get rid of their old emails after 6 months, which would make it very hard to find historical documents and such to find out what's going on there. And then they moved to a year. This protects those emails for 2 years. The only problem is that the agreement will last for 5 years, which means that after 5 years, they can go back to whatever policy they want. So we have 5 years, and the state legislature in particular has 5 years, I think, to try to clarify the rules about how long these agencies must keep their emails as an archive. Because one thing I learned through this is that public records law is pretty clear, but how it applies specifically to emails and how long those are supposed to be archived is less clear. Less clear enough that it can be exploited as they tried to. And they're not the only ones. There are plenty of other city governments, school districts, and others who have much shorter timelines for how long they keep these emails. And so that has to get dealt with, in my opinion. So check that out. Again, our lawsuit continues. We have a long-term concern about several public records requests being delayed, sometimes years.
Yes.
And then also just, not being responded to in full, stuff like that. So we are continuing that. San Diegans for Open Government are now off the case on that one. So check that out. All right. Our Sweetwater, this was a big story. During a strange and dramatic meeting of the Sweetwater Union High School District Board Monday night, the state's Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistant Team accused district employees of knowingly covering up the district's ongoing financial crisis triggered by massive spending. Remember, we learned in September that Sweetwater had an emergency cash crisis. It's not odd for districts, of course, to have tough cuts they have to make for years to come, but Sweetwater suddenly found itself this year without cash, running low to the point where they had to make emergency cuts and shifts, which is nothing like what usually happens. And it's very hard for them to do because they can't actually cut teachers in any given year without giving them a notice in March to do that. And so this is the money part. The district officials repeatedly denied knowing anything about the district's overspending until we all found out about it. And they described it as an accident, innocent errors, bad software. But the new report says that district employees may have committed actual criminal fraud. The CEO of this agency, I never heard of this one, Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistant Team.
Yes.
FICMAT.
Yeah, they came in. Michael Fine, the CEO of that group, came in and said that 302 entries in the district's accounting system were doctored to create the impression that the district had more money than it really did. That, my friends and colleagues, is a cover-up, he said, and that elicited gasps from the board members and others in the room. Wow.
It's like from a crime procedural.
Yes.
What a meeting that must have been.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Typically auditors will water down their findings after they find something because you have to keep up a working relationship with the people you audit. It's usually there's lots of nods and winks and euphemisms.
This guy just came in and said, crimes.
Rare that you wave your hands and say, they're breaking the law.
They did cover-ups.
Yeah.
Crimes.
They poured bleach on the papers.
Unbelievable. Will Hunsberry has been all over this story since the beginning. He broke the news in September about the shortfall, and it seems to be there's actual evidence that they are doctoring documents to hide how much they were spending.
Yes.
And then the 3 leaders of the financial services team resigned in August. The new person comes in and is like, holy
Scott, that was just
a pre-planned
retirement.
Yeah,
That was unrelated
Nothing
to
to
this.
do with all the doing of crimes and cover-ups.
I'm sure as time plays out, we'll continue to see that was a pre-planned retirement that had no relation to this crisis.
Pre-planned, just time to hang them up.
One thing I'm sure will stand up in 5 years is that.
Right. All right, we are going to do something new this year. Our inaugural naughty and nice list. We've each come up with 2 naughty and nices. This was not easy.
Oh, I think it was easy.
I got to tell you, finding things that were nice was really hard for me. Very few things.
All right, we didn't do our rock paper scissors tournament, but I am going to arbitrarily decide that Sara will begin.
Okay.
You can choose naughty or nice. Let's go.
Let's start with nice.
Yeah.
It's nice, right?
It's heartwarming.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh. All right. My first nice pick is Senator Nancy Skinner and Senate Bill 1421. If that doesn't, immediately jog your memory, let me explain. This is a law that passed earlier this year that I think journalists and advocates across the state have been hoping for years. California has some of the most closed off public records when it comes to police misconduct in the country. And so what this bill will do is open up a lot of those records. Hopefully we'll be able to see them for the first time. Allows the public to obtain police personnel records for officers involved in the use of deadly force, sustained allegations of sexual assault, and sustained misconduct. So starting on January 1st, you can request those kinds of records from those departments, and, it might get some pretty ugly stories brought out into light.
California had notoriously harsh privacy requirements on these.
For all of California's liberalism, we had the most restrictive laws keeping these records a secret in the country. So good job. Excited about that.
Yeah, that is a nice. All right. Andrew.
All right. My naughty is for Democrats who acted like it was unreasonable to ask them whether Mickey Kasparian should be forced to resign.
From the United Food and Commercial Workers local union. He had been the president there and the president of the Labor Council for a long time. Probably one of the most influential, if not the most influential labor leader in town.
Yeah.
And he was accused of what exactly?
It was gender discrimination, sexual misconduct by multiple different employees. So,
assault in some cases.
Yeah, I don't think they ever used that word, which is why I haven't. Although I think it might be a fair description.
I think from reading the descriptions of what happened, that was my takeaway of what I would call it.
Yes, agreed. So there was, in the midst of this Me Too era, we had a influential political figure that was accused of something very serious. And suddenly there was the invention of a new standard, which was that it was unreasonable to ask other elected leaders to take a stand on this question one way or another. One common sentiment was that it was up to the union members themselves to decide, as if the next time a major CEO is accused of some sort of impropriety, that a reasonable call will be that the shareholders should just wait till the next corporate retreat to make a decision.
It's just up to them. It's just a question of the shareholder.
And so, look, I understand that it was hard and you didn't want to have to say something because he's a powerful person and has been known for taking out revenge on people. But it's hard is not a logical argument. And so to all the Democrats who railed against the Union Tribune and specifically Josh Stewart for putting together a public spreadsheet about which people had forced him to resign and thought that that was in some way unfair, you guys were just being cowards.
Boom. All right.
I'm here for that entry.
I am too. All right. I'm going to do a nice before our break. Nice. The UT was sold along with the LA Times to a owner in the Los Angeles area. His name, of course, is Patrick Soon-Shin. That happened in early February. Look, been tons of hiring at the LA Times since then. Every week I seem to open up the Twitter and see a bunch of new ads for jobs. I hope the same level of investment comes to the UT. They hired our old friend and pal and excellent photographer, Sam Hodson.
Yes.
At the UT, which seems to signal an investment in photography, which is fantastic. But also, I'm just glad that this happened. This was a nice thing, nice bit of news, as Tronc was a complete disaster and apparently still is, even though it no longer exists as Tronc. Horrible story about paying off an old editor at the LA Times after he had surreptitiously recorded one of the executives making anti-Semitic remarks. Lots of weird stories continue to come from Tronc and not from their reporting. So we got a whole bunch of other nices and naughties coming up after the break, so please stick with us.
Hey there, I'm Nate John, Digital Manager at Voice.
And I'm Adriana Heldies, Assistant Digital Manager. In addition to producing this show, Nate and I also work on a cool project here at Voice. It's called The People's Reporter.
So, real quick, The People's Reporter is a series that tries to answer your questions about San Diego. And we have a newsroom full of really smart people here at Voice, so we'll pretty much always get you the answers.
So far, we've tackled frequently asked questions about Balboa Park,
We've talked about what the deal is with Hillcrest restaurants,
whether the Hilton Bayfront pool is open to the public,
and we figured out how many San Diegans are actually from San Diego.
We're talking to you right now because we have a new set of questions for our listeners, and we want to know which one is most important to you.
Just head to our website, that's voiceofsandiego.org/peoplesreporter, again, voiceofsandiego.org/peoplesreporter, and there you can pick which question you really want the answer to.
Here are the ones for this round. Number 1, how are city streets being repaired and who decides how we pay?
Number 2, does the city's Get It Done San Diego app actually get it done?
And number 3, why are there so many deaths by train between downtown and Oceanside, and what's being done about it?
You can vote on these right now at our website, or you can always tell us what you have been wondering about San Diego, and we'll work on getting you an answer.
Again, that's voiceofsandiego.org/peoplesreporter.
The following is a sponsored message from American Medical Response. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. American Medical Response has been caring for patients in San Diego County for over 65 years. As an exclusive 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
This is our Christmas special. Let's get right into this discussion. I think it's Sarah's turn. A naughty or a nice?
I'm going naughty. Let's keep it going.
I was a word, isn't it?
I was a little worried about saying naughty a lot.
Yeah,
and
it's
that was
not a
one of
good
those moments.
word.
That
It's
came
not
out.
good.
That's good. Actually, maybe it's great. Maybe we should just switch.
What we should definitely do is cut out Sarah saying, "I'm going naughty,"
No.
and use that as a drop from here on out.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. Can't wait. All right. My pick is the County of San Diego. So this actually just enraged me all over again, kind of reading up on it. Back in, I think it was June, the county dropped its after action report on its response to the Hep A outbreak, which, just as a refresher, a disease spread through fecal matter that killed 20 people. So not a good situation. But the county's assessment of how it responded to that crisis, let me just read a little snippet. The county's response was characterized by a concentrated focus on the challenge at hand, a reliance on extensive public-private partnerships and innovative approaches tested for the first time. The diverse mix of partners was unique and extensive. One can look at the response and identify areas of success as well as areas for improvement.
Oh, that is. I forgot how bad that is.
Yeah, I don't know what universe you're living in when you're able to describe 20 deaths on city streets with words like innovative and success.
Or like trotting out
public-private
jargon,
partnerships.
And there is a way to do a full comprehensive report that talks about how you responded, all those things, without the declarative things like that. Stay away from the declaratives. That's all. You don't have to say something was good or innovative or anything like that. Just say what happened, some of the things you did, and as a lesson learned type document, right?
I mean, that is some very back patty-ish right there.
Yeah,
that is
I mean, I think it's shameful. And again, looking back on it, I don't think that they got enough, pushback on this.
There wasn't
that document.
Yeah.
Well, just a reckoning in general. Have we really
Absolutely.
reckoned with what?
So the state is actually dropping its own HEPE audit at any moment. It might be out by the time this podcast is out. I'm guessing that it's not going to include words like innovative and success.
What if that was the first word? It was like the innovative, successful response to 20 deaths on city streets.
I will come back on next week's podcast and apologize if that's the case.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes part and parcel, too, with their general approach, which has been like, we are doing a great job. And on homelessness, look at how much money we've spent. Look at how much we've changed. Look at all this. And, like, I keep getting back to the point, like, it doesn't matter. Like, all that's good, and I'm glad that you're doing that. But you cannot, it completely does not encapsulate the reality that there's thousands of people living on the streets right now, and that it doesn't really matter how much you've changed your operations or you've ramped up support or whatever, unless we start to see a dent or change in that. Like that's what we're asking for. That's what and it's becoming clear that it's the top priority of every constituent in the region. Like,
yeah, I mean,
fix this.
Yeah, the polling you had in the story you wrote last week about the Republicans Come to Jesus Summit about what they do after their election drubbing. They had public opinion surveys like homelessness is the biggest issue.
Yeah, it doubles up the number 2, which is roads. And roads is a big deal. People are always complaining about roads.
Yeah.
Right. So to just double down on this idea that like the whole conversation surrounding the county and homelessness is that the county doesn't get enough credit. That's like Ron Roberts' take.
Yeah,
he had like a very petulant, embarrassing outburst at a meeting in which that was his whole take.
Right.
And I just think, they need to be doing some soul searching, I think.
Imagine just like telling somebody who lives downtown but doesn't pay day in, day out close attention to public affairs, like what a great job the county's doing on homelessness.
I mean, that's why they need to shift the thinking around it as though pretend it's like a fire that's ongoing. It's literally burning. Yeah. Like you wouldn't pat anybody on the back at that point. You're like, we still have to put this out because it's still happening. But for some reason, people living on the streets is not considering that. All right. Let's go on to the next one. That would be you.
Yeah.
You can do a naughty or
I'm going to do a naughty again.
Oh, doubling up.
So there's some symmetry here in my first selection. This one is for Republicans who acted like it was unreasonable to ask for their opinion on President Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yes.
Guys, he is the president. He wears your party label. It is eminently reasonable for voters to ask how you feel about him.
Yes.
Well,
and your complaint, once again, much like the last one, your complaint is not that it is somehow unfair or presents a slippery slope where you'll be asked to weigh in on other things that don't involve city government. It's that you don't like being forced to answer the question because it's hard. And I'm sorry, but you're being cowards.
Yeah, just to both of your entries, it's not unreasonable to ask politicians about any public affairs issue. Honestly, like Prop 10, the rent control debate, I think that is fair game. And people sat that debate out because they didn't want to anger either side. And it's stupid.
Yeah, I think it's okay to even say, like, I don't want to say, but don't act like it's an unreasonable question. And which came up so much. Like people like, that's national or whatever. No, that he's proposing things that have a direct influence here. It's it matters. There's a war between the federal government and the state. Like I shouldn't say war, but you know what I mean. It's serious. Like, we're going to ask you about it.
Like,
you run the police department, for example.
Yes.
Like, there's proposals about how the police should interact with the federal government because of what the president's doing. We're going to ask you about those things.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty of partisan politics, it doesn't disappear because you'd like it to. I'm sorry. You don't like it? Leave the party. Or lean in. You like him. Or do the hard thing and say you don't like him, but you're going to stay in the party and deal with the results from the other Republicans who like him. Whatever. I don't know. That's your problem. But you don't get to just be angry that people want you to deal with your problem.
Good one. All right. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a naughty.
Let's go ahead and clip that. Scott saying I'm going to do a naughty also. 'Cause, yikes.
I'm leaning in, man. Naughty. All right. So I'm going to nominate the blurring of the reason for campaign finance laws. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Duncan Hunter Jr. was accused of misusing campaign funds for his own personal use. And there's a lot of people saying, like, what does it matter? And then there was a lot of people talking about President Donald Trump in the same way as his lawyer was accused and later confessed to buying off or paying porn stars and others who had alleged to have affairs with the president in doing so in order to help his campaign for president. And a lot of people are like, well, what does that have to do with campaign finance or whatever? And these two things are very interrelated. Behind all the complexity of modern campaign finance is one concept. We want to make sure that money going into a politician's pocket is only from his public salary or legitimate personal income, and to prevent elected officials from partaking in bribery, the most basic form of corruption, right? And so we do that by setting up these laws that say people can't pay for things for you in any indirect way that helps you personally. We don't want them to put money into your pocket or to otherwise hide things about how it helps you.
Yeah, so I'll say part of the reason I think people misunderstand what's important here, how I would distill what's important here is that political donations are not supposed to be bribes. Once a political donation goes in and then can be spent for personal purposes, then it is in effect a bribe. The problem that people have is they already view political donations as bribes.
Right.
And so the distinction you're drawing isn't one that feels salient to them because they've always thought of it as, well, all this money is moving about. They don't recognize that it is supposed to be sequestered off and only deal with specific campaign functions.
And the naughty action that I'm trying to highlight is that we have a concerted effort to blur that further.
Yeah, well, it's to people's benefit.
Exactly. And so we have created a system, however flawed it is, where this money is supposed to go to independent accounts, and you're not supposed to use it for those things, and you're supposed to disclose where it comes from and what you spent it on. And so I just want to take a stand for, if you're ever having an argument over Christmas dinner or whatever, make it clear that the whole reason that we have those campaigns like that is because we don't want people to just put money in people's pockets, and that we have to disclose where that money goes so that we can make sure that it didn't go into their pockets, and that if something is spent on the side that helps that person that isn't disclosed, that has a direct benefit for them that they're going to feel indebted to, and can either come off as a gift if it's a personal donation or personal gift, or it can come off as a campaign donation that, again, isn't being disclosed. And so that's why we have these laws. And as messy as they are, what Duncan Hunter did was flagrant disregard for these laws. By spending it out, it seems almost the indictment is just brutal to him. And then on the other side, if Trump and his campaign are going to spend money without disclosing it to help the campaign, that is also a problem because it creates debts and obligations on the side that we don't want public officials to have. Is that fair?
Yes.
I know that was a little esoteric, but thank you. All right, Sarah.
I'm going to go nice.
Okay.
My nice is the UTC. I think there's been a lot of trend pieces the last few years about how malls are dying. Malls are very special in Southern California. I am a big fan of malls in particular. I got actually a text last night from our friend Kinsey Moreland. She was panicked. She still had a lot of Christmas shopping to do. And she said, "What are the malls? What mall do I go to? Certainly you would know." And I was like, bruh, you got to get to the UTC. It's the best.
It's pretty nice, huh?
Yeah. So there have been several local stories about how the food scene at the UTC is the best in the city. They've got like all the cool chains as well as some other local places like Great Maple, Shake Shack, Din Tai Fung. UT just named Din Tai Fung the restaurant of the year. And all of this is at the UTC. There's poke, there's tacos, there's health food, there's really bad, amazing fast food. But there's also awesome retail stuff. And I think like in San Diego, we think of ourselves as being kind of like, we don't get any of the cool stuff, but all these stores that are opening are like really awesome. And I love them. We have cool things and they're at the UTC. You should go.
Okay. It's a good take.
Andrew.
I will provide a nice here. This goes to SB 827, nay, SB 50. Although 827 died a quick and relatively anticlimactic death, and frankly, I expect SB 50 to do the same, I am nonetheless happy and refreshed that there is at least a piece of legislation that is willing to acknowledge the scale and severity of the land use problems facing California and any hope to not only deal with the affordable housing crisis, but our absurd greenhouse gas emissions that are driven almost entirely by our land use patterns and will be regardless of what happens in our energy consumption at the present rate. SB 827, now SB 50. SB 50 has some changes that I think will make it more politically popular, but they basically take the decision-making out of the hands of local cities and say, this is not something that you have discretion over. If you have a transit stop, then you must make it easy for developers to build lots and lots and lots of housing nearby. California has the unfortunate curse of being primarily developed after the advent of the automobile, and if you move around the city, it seems that way very much. And this is one of the few things that actually is willing to deal with how difficult it'll be to stop that. We talk a lot about housing deregulation at the local level, and those are fine things, and we should do them, but they're at best nibbling at the margins.
And I like how you put it with the idea of scale, because so much of my frustration in the last few years about this legislation and other things about this crisis is that it's all this like nibbling on the edges. It's like, even some of the funding, which seems like big numbers, really is just a drop in the bucket of what it can create and how much it can build and stuff like that. And it literally hasn't built anything yet. It's coming, I guess. My point is like, the problem, even if we had a ton of money, the problem is not necessarily the money. There are plenty of companies that would love to build housing. It's that it's not allowed. And I like how Scott Wiener's been talking about, like, legalize housing. Like, we have a prohibition on housing in so many parts of our cities. And so it's nice to see, you're right, like something on the scale that can literally change the scale of this discussion. And it's so hard. I think Liam Dillon did a really great tweet the other day because he was listening to the governor, and the governor was talking about how it's impossible to solve the housing crisis in this state. And here's a guy who like wants to launch satellites and wants to solve global warming.
Yeah,
and
but housing's impossible.
And he says housing is impossible. It's like, come on, like that's not what I want to hear. So cool.
And now I'm to be clear, if you just don't like these types of policies, fine. But like, let's at least be honest about what we're dealing with, and these bills have at least been honest about what we're dealing with.
Yeah, agree. All right, back to you, Sarah.
All right, I've got the last entry on my list is the naughty.
Okay.
This goes to Shelley Zimmerman. So we actually got a little news this week from Michael Smollins at the UT, who wrote that the former police chief is confirmed she's considering running for mayor. So I thought it would be a good time to revisit a story that Jesse Marks did earlier this year about Shelley Zimmerman's advocacy against the legalization of marijuana, which is a perfectly decent opinion to have. But in advocating against legalization, she went to the city council and she presented some stats that she had. She said the legal medical marijuana dispensaries in the city had racked up 272 police calls, suggesting that there was going to be, a lot of crime, a crime wave as a result of new storefronts opening. Not only has that not been borne out by the first year of legalization, but it turns out that those stats were pretty wildly misleading. They included calls to other storefronts in the same office park that happened to include a dispensary, or came from a fender bender in the parking lot of a office park that included a dispensary. Prank calls, like a homeless person rummaging through a garbage can. Those are all things that were wrapped up and attributed to the dispensaries as being catalysts for crime. And
when a police chief sounds the alarm about something, it needs to mean something. It needs to be strong. We cannot be wondering if it's this kind of compilation of nonsense.
Yeah. And then those same stats were used not just by San Diego ended up, approving storefronts against her wishes, but those same stats were used in other cities across the region and presented to officials as, look, San Diego's police chief says we shouldn't do this because look at these alarming statistics. So it wasn't just her comments at that meeting, that really spread to try and influence people all over the county.
Yeah, and I would add about the statistics. We are taught very, very consciously to not speculate on motives. But I would say that a journalist who made that sort of mistake would be sharply criticized. But I could at least understand that a journalist might make a records request, get back a bunch of addresses, put those addresses into Google, and not think, oh, wait, there might be multiple suites at that address where crimes might have occurred, and I shouldn't summarize them as all having occurred at this one dispensary. It is beyond my ability to charitably find an interpretation where the police chief is unaware of the way that those statistics might be misrepresentative.
And even if, you're right. And even if
there's
she
just no way she's so unfamiliar with those statistics. There's just no way.
Right. And if she wasn't familiar with them, she is now, and she refused to kind of publicly grapple with this revelation once it was made. She hasn't come back and said, yeah, maybe this wasn't the right way to cite these, or this didn't really frame things in the most accurate way, and she hasn't done that.
Good one. All right, Andrew, your last one.
So nice. Here we go. Boy, sports in San Diego has been a tough hang for a couple years now.
Garbage fire.
It's been a garbage fire.
Dumpster fire.
But I'm here to tell you there is an outlet, a sports outlet here in San Diego that doesn't have any of that baggage. You don't need to resent the owner. You don't need to even, have all the times you've been burned in the past be part of the conversation. You can just dive right into the chilly Pacific waters of the San Diego Seals, the new National Lacrosse League team. It's made its home at San Diego Sports Arena, which I've dubbed the children's pool for the purposes of the San Diego Seals playing there.
Pretty proud of yourself, aren't you?
I like it. Good job.
Thank you. And look, they have their...
That's very San Diego. That's good.
That's right. They have their opening game on Saturday. There's a watch party over at some bar in Little Italy I'm going to go to. But their home opener is January 5th. I genuinely do promise you, if you're looking for like a wholesome, fun, family type of thing, it'll be cheaper than most of your professional sporting events. And I mean this, it will be fun. It will be fun and lightning fast. It's an exciting sport. I'm genuinely happy about it. I understand that most people don't consider lacrosse a real sport. I obviously do, but I'm very excited to watch the San Diego Seals this year.
All right, one last naughty to close this out. All right, I'm going with this one is emblematic of a bigger sort of problem I obviously talk a lot about, but I'm going to go ahead and talk again. I'm going to dub the signature gathering flub for the convention center effort this summer as a major naughty, and the reason why is because of their steadfast unwillingness to grapple with reality. That there was never a moment where, even though I heard, and several of us heard over and over and over again, that it was not going well, that would have major consequences for public policy going forward and for the election, that each and every time they refused to acknowledge it was not going well, and yet would continue to send these like weird signals like, well, we're just trying to be safe, or we're just, just raising, trying to get as many signatures as possible. I don't know what it was, but it drove me nuts when they finally turned in their signatures and they didn't cross the threshold to get it qualified right away, which was, they later blamed on fraud, which, by the way, I've not heard of them
didn't
delivering.
File that lawsuit,
so
huh?
weird that didn't materialize.
They didn't do the lawsuit.
Probably still doing their due diligence.
Yeah.
I imagine that lawsuit's forthcoming.
Yeah. So
along
that,
with the revelation that in Sweetwater, those really were just
retirement.
retired.
They're just
Wish them
retiring.
well.
Yeah.
Long
Just
career.
going, long career done. Yeah. No, so it's and so that is emblematic of the bigger problem, in my opinion, which is that there's every agency after agency, campaign after campaign, public person after public person, company leader after company leader in this region, and I'm sure elsewhere, are unwilling to acknowledge when something's not going well, and that things would be a lot better if they did, whether it's the county of San Diego talking about homelessness, or whether it's the school district talking about schools that aren't doing well, or some graduates that are leaving to go to other schools or to go to charter schools or whatever. In every one of these cases is somebody being unwilling to say that things didn't go as planned, and here's what we're going to do about it, and instead insisting to people like us that it is going as planned, that it is going well, and yay. And you should be nicer. And that drives me nuts, because I don't think it's a form of optimism to do that. I think it's actually a dark, like, gaslighting, and it's just not good.
Yeah, it's the most cynical thing you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of Voice of San Diego and everybody, wanted to wish you a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas if you celebrate that. We will be back next week. We're going to have a special year-end show. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice. Sarah Libby is our managing editor. Andy Keatts is the assistant editor. This show was produced by Adriana Heldiz and Nate John. Audio editing by Adam Greenfield. And if you like what we do at Voice of San Diego, again, please, we really need you to consider giving at voiceofsandiego.org/donate.